2019 was a very significant celebration for queer rights internationally with the 50th anniversary of Stonewall, and here in Canada with the 50th anniversary of the Criminal Law Amendment Act, also known as Bill C-150. Many will argue that these events are not the origins of the queer rights movement, as many strides were made prior to 1969 and the Stonewall riot. But this is definitely an anniversary worth celebrating, when the world finally took note and the fight for equality began on a global level. Around the planet, events took place commemorating this silver anniversary, and here in Montreal at Centre Never Apart, we programmed our summer exhibitions and events to coincide with this. This film documents the important work we showcased in our galleries, and also follows folks in Toronto, Vancouver, and New York City, where World Pride and the Stonewall parades, festivities, and protests took place. We hear from different artists here in North America on their perspectives of the queer movement and how these events from 50 years ago have influenced their works, and what has to happen to ensure the fight for equality continues. Also, we get a German perspective of the movement with the Queer as German Folk exhibition produced by the Goethe Institute, which happened across the planet in major cities and was influenced by the events that took place at Stonewall.
I'm Uwe Rau and I'm the director of the Goethe Institute in Toronto. Well, the Goethe Institute is the cultural institute of Germany. We convey a comprehensive image of Germany by providing information about cultural, political, social life of our country. Well, this exhibition I'm personally really excited about because a year ago we came together, the colleagues from the other institutes in North America, and talked about a project we could all do together, which is not that easy actually. And my colleague, the director of the Institute in New York, he suggested that we should use the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall riots as a topic because it does relate directly to Germany-US relations, but also North American relations, Canada and Mexico included. As we are all active in big cities, there with significant queer communities, we thought it would resonate to an audience which we have never addressed, I would say, that directly. And well, this project consists of three major components. It's this exhibition here, Queer as German Folk. It also includes a film program. We just finished the program here in Toronto with the Inside Out Festival. And the third component is a conference, a panel on different queer issues. And in Toronto, it will be the topic of queer culture. Doing that, we thought it is timely, actually. It's never been done. 50 years of Stonewall are interested. Stonewall was extremely important. But I guess with the distance of 50 years, the initial 100% positive perception of Stonewall has changed. And now I guess there are lots of perspective, also from younger generations, to criticize or to question certain developments caused and done by Stonewall. For example, the involvement of not only of white gay men, as Stonewall was, and that I guess was a little bit forgotten in the history, was a movement in Germany where many black people were involved, transgender people were involved, but the narrative, and also how I experienced it in Germany many years ago, was that it is a gay white men's movement, and that actually, as we all know now, is not the case.
I'm Katja Melzer and I'm the director of the Goethe Institute here in Montreal. The exhibition basically starts out at the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall riots and looks a little bit at how these events, historical events, influenced the liberation movements in Germany. So there are different episodes, there are a lot of fun flyers, posters to explore, photos of course, to get to know a bit more about that lesser known aspect of German history. When we were looking to show the exhibit here in Montreal, we were not just looking for a space, but an actual partner. So Never Apart immediately came to our mind because we love their mandate. They provide a platform for local and international artists while also putting a focus really on diversity and inclusion. So that seemed like the perfect fit. We also knew we were going to be in good company because there are a lot of other exciting exhibitions happening at the same time that throw a different light also on the events that happened in Montreal, in Quebec, but also internationally.
So my name is Georg Blochmann. We are here in the Goethe Institute in New York, and I'm currently the manager of this institute. The title of this exhibition is Queer as German Folk. It's not only this weekend, we are at the end of the Pride month, June, where New York celebrated the Stonewall 50 Jubilee with more than 400 events and more than 20 exhibitions on the issue of the queer movement throughout the last 50 years.
I'm Peter Rehberg and I am Head of Collections and Archives at Schwules Museum in Berlin. The museum has a history of 35 years. It started with an exhibition called El Dorado about gay life in the city of Berlin, which was, of course, significant, especially also in the beginning of the 20th century. Berlin or Germany is said to have had the first gay rights movement in the Western world before Stonewall. And so we had this exhibition in the mid-80s, El Dorado, and after that exhibition, a group of gay students had the idea of founding this museum. And it was, for the longest time, it was a very small space in a kind of courtyard in Kreuzberg. And about 6 years ago, we moved to a larger location. So we're in the process of becoming more and more professional, getting state money, having larger exhibition, larger research projects, growing. And we are said to be the largest archive, LGBTQ archive worldwide with about 1.5 million or so objects. So yeah, that's what the Schwules Museum is.
My name is Elle Flanders, and I've had many lives. We can say it's been a drag performance from the time I was probably 19. I used to run the Inside Out Gay and Lesbian Film Festival. We even called it the Gay and Lesbian Film Festival back then because we weren't queer enough. I was an activist, I'm a filmmaker, and I'm an artist based in Toronto. I think activism is important. I guess I see it more as a part of why is history important, or, sort of more of a question of how do we need to understand how we are in the world and how do we actually create change. I think activism allows one to be aware of changing possibility. I think we've lost some of those skills, sort of with the advent of social media and things like that have made us much more focused on ourselves. And I think it's created less connections between communities, despite sort of Facebook's idea that we're all one and connected. We're not physically so much connected anymore, and I think it's removed us. And so I guess I would say activism is important today as a way of reconnecting us and making us sort of see what it is between us that can help us change that which needs changing.
I'm Dream Crusher. Stonewall is the epicenter of the queer movement. It's where the queer movement started, and a Black trans woman is the one who started it. And it's really interesting that nowadays queer people as a whole are starting to acknowledge our history, learn more about it, and how that intersects with how we're living now. I'm gonna point to examples that I know personally, and that's my mom. My mom was an active participant in the Black Panther movement. She left the party because there wasn't a really strong female representation in it. A lot of the women who were in charge of the People's Free Food Program and things like that, but when it came to asserting opinions about how things are being run, she decided to kind of separate herself from that. And my mom is also really, at one point, was really in tune with queer people in her space and in our home. And what I'm learning about people from that era is that shit was exhausting. It was so exhausting, specifically because in order to create a network for connecting people of like minds, you could die. And living in constant fear of your death based on commonality is extremely stressful.
My name is Joe Average. The type of art I create is, best I can describe it, is pop art. I don't know, just filling you with the joy of color, whatever you get from it, whatever you see it, people say, what does this piece mean? Or what is it? I don't like to influence people at all. If they see something way different than I see, that's awesome to me. In 1991, pretty sure it's 1991, there was a nationwide Canadian competition to design a poster for a National AIDS Awareness Week in Canada. What? Canada's doing this? This was in the early 90s. So I designed something and I sent it in as an entry, and it ended up winning. And when it was unveiled, Goethe Institute was the wife of the Governor General of Canada, Raymond Institute. Her big platform was HIV and AIDS. She wanted to help with that so bad. So she flew out from Ottawa to unveil this poster for AIDS Awareness Week. And it happened at the Vancouver Art Gallery, and it was all very formal. I was a bit nervous because she was there with like our RCMP guys, you know, they're all dressed up and stuff. And so, but we got along really well. I mean, we hit it off. And so it got unveiled and it was a success, and it was really great. And then about 6 months later, I get this very fancy envelope, embossed envelope with gold and all that stuff from Rideau Hall in Ottawa. And inside was an invitation for me to go to Rideau Hall to have, as one of 50 Canadians, to have lunch with the Prince and Princess of Wales. So I got invited to go have lunch with Princess Diana, which was awesome, but I didn't have no money to fly to Ottawa. So a bunch of queens in town took it upon themselves to do a fundraiser for me. And we auctioned off the little painting that I did for the poster, and they raised enough money for me to fly to Ottawa. A few years later, I got asked to design the image for the 11th International Conference on AIDS, which was being held in Vancouver in 1996. They approached me in 1994 to do this because it had to be done 2 years early so that they could have a poster in place to advertise it at the AIDS conference the year before. I did this image and it was received really well. It was everywhere in Vancouver. It was on banners. It was everywhere.
Hi, my name is Véronique Boilard. I'm a cultural worker. I'm an archivist. I'm also co-curator of the exhibition La Présence de l'Absence with my colleague.
Hi, I'm Virginie and I co-curate this show.
So La Présence de l'Absence is an exhibit that gathers together 11 artists, and it's also a collaboration with Gay Archives of Quebec. So for this exhibit, we've asked all of those artists to do residency in the Gay Archives of Quebec and to look through the material that they have, to look through all the things that would interest them in the idea of the archives, in the idea of the memories that you can find through those archives. And we asked them to create a new piece of work, a new artwork, a new something.
Any institution who take care of her memories, who take care of queer artists, I mean, there is no space for taking care of her archive, and actually it's a huge and big problem. And so this exhibition just want to create some dialogue between artists and between the public, of course, and I think taking part of the discussion with the institution to say, hey, we exist, we are like 10% of the population, we are here, and we need space to work with her history, because if we don't have space, every generation have to start to the beginning and redo the work. It's political. We talk about politics, impact, and
yeah, because a lot of things that have been gained, that have been won, that have been can be thrown away so easily as we see in the current political state. So
it's super grateful for us also to work with the queer artists from Montreal, and there is a super great community here, and the artists accept to participate to the exhibition with a lot of generosity and lot of love for the question of archive. And yeah, it makes me super happy actually. I'm super proud and super happy because I know that it's important to talk together about that and to continue to work. And so if it could be like an alarm for every institution, every art council to say, hey, perhaps there is a problem, there is no space and there is no support for the archive.
Mon nom c'est La Mathilde, ou encore Mathilde Germain, et je viens faire ici une installation vidéo avec 3 vidéos sur iPad et une installation de découpage et de photocopie d'articles que j'ai trouvés aux archives. Donc j'ai participé à ce projet-là parce qu'il était très important pour moi d'inscrire l'histoire des autres ou de m'inscrire dans l'histoire des autres et de ces autres qui sont la communauté LGBTQ+. J'ai accepté parce que ça fait longtemps que cette question d'archives me travaille, parce qu'autour de moi les gens disparaissent et il n'y a plus de traces d'eux, parce que ce que j'ai vécu il y a quelques années avec plein de collectifs de femmes n'ont laissé aucune trace. Et c'est toujours les mêmes qui réécrivent les histoires, donc j'avais envie que l'histoire s'écrive différemment et que j'y participe. Donc c'était une manière pour moi d'y participer et de m'inscrire dans une histoire qui va rester quelque part dans des boîtes, mais quelque part. Et que quelqu'un d'autre, peut-être dans 30 ans, va redécouvrir et se dire « Oh, quelqu'un existait !» et puis c'est la même personne que moi. Donc ça, c'était très important. Par où je suis partie pour faire ce travail-là? J'avais très envie de faire un travail avec un ami à moi qui est un homme trans d'un certain âge et parler des différences d'interprétation et du vécu des histoires LGBTQ. Donc cet homme-là aujourd'hui, en fait certaines lesbiennes radicales refusent de lui parler et je voulais faire tout un travail autour de comment on parlait des trans à cette époque, ou comment les lesbiennes parlaient des hommes et des trans. Puis finalement, c'est très compliqué puisque le discours aujourd'hui sur ces questions-là reste compliqué. Il faudrait qu'on développe des outils pour se parler les uns les autres, pour que les communautés se rejoignent et s'aiment en fait, et s'apprécient et ne se sentent pas abusées. Donc je suis partie sur le fait que les femmes qui vivaient en tant qu'hommes et les hommes qui vivaient en tant que femmes dans les années 50 et avant ça étaient évidemment déjà emprisonnée. J'ai retrouvé énormément de textes qui parlaient de ça et je me suis focusée sur plusieurs cas de femmes qui vivaient en hommes, qui sont fait arrêter, dont on a perdu les traces par la suite. Je suis tombée, je me suis laissée emporter par ces histoires-là et j'ai voulu rajouter mes propres archives à moi à ça parce qu'il y a certaines vidéos que j'avais qui faisaient vraiment référence aux histoires même qui étaient dans les articles de journaux. Donc j'ai retravaillé ces vidéos pour les inscrire dans cette grande histoire et les inscrire physiquement dans ce mur, hein, parce que c'est vraiment, on a tous heurté un mur à un moment donné dans nos vies et dans toutes ces histoires, les choses qui sont identiques pour tout le monde, ce sont les insultes qu'on se prend dans la gueule en permanence, qui sont à peu près les mêmes hier et aujourd'hui. Et au-delà de ça, j'ai été regarder dans l'histoire de l'humanité, on va dire, j'ai été voir du côté des Sumériens ce qui se passait au niveau des sexes et au niveau de comment on vivait dans un genre ou dans l'autre. Et c'était la même affaire, sauf qu'on en mourait moins. Mais il y a des tablettes et des lois qui ont été écrites pour expliquer quels droits tu avais quand tu étais un homme, une femme et que tu voulais vivre dans le genre différent ou que tu avais des relations sexuelles avec le même genre que toi. Et j'ai été stupéfaite de voir que c'était la même affaire avec des insultes à peu près identiques.
My name is Candace Moores. My piece is titled Plants Queers Leave Behind. It's about the legacies that we leave behind outside of the archives. It's a work that is about the collective houses that I've lived in, and it's about migration, the reasons why people leave, and it's about care and continuing that care.
So my name is Kinga Michalska. I'm a photographer and videographer. My piece is called Ephebia, and it's a fake magazine from the 90s. I went to the archives sort of with an open mind. I didn't really know what I'll make, and I decided to investigate the photo collection because that's my primary medium. And I found a lot of photos of white gay men, a lot of dick and muscular, bodies that were very similar to one another, stacks and stacks and boxes of boxes. So I felt like something was missing, and I decided to make a piece that would comment on like who's missing and what kind of narratives are missing. So I went to Poland this summer and I looked more for this magazine, but it turned out that actually the magazine never came out. It was widely publicized, but I guess they didn't have funds or something happened. They did not release the magazine, so I decided to make it today as like a, I don't know, speculative fiction or utopian magazine and reimagine it in a way that I would have liked it to be. So I renamed it from Ephebos, which is more mask, to Ephebia, which is more femme. And I made a call for models, and I had the trans, lesbian, non-binary people come to an erotic shoot in a hotel room that I rented.
So my piece is called Leaving Space. It's an installation of 3 fabric boxes made out of organza and embroidered with text. They say each for the unrecorded, for the unrecordable, and for the yet to be recorded. And I was thinking of how to create something that would not be specific to something that could be categorized in the archive, but rather something that would literally leave space for everything you can't put in the archives. Yeah.
My name is Andrew Tay. I did a video installation in this exhibition in collaboration with François Lalumière, who also made some sculptures for the work. Our process of working with the archive, I went twice to the archive, and I mean, one of the things, I'm a dance artist, so one of the things I was looking for is things that related to the body. And then, of course, people were really excited to show me like culturism magazines and bodybuilding. And so, I mean, because of the title of the exhibition also, which is dealing with kind of like presence and what's not present, we were thinking about this aspiration to this really like cis masculine kind of body. And so, obviously me and François are also both cis men, but we were thinking like, how can we create some kind of archive of the body that kind of confuses that? So we tried to create a video work where it's really extreme close-up of the body and where you can't really tell. I mean, things look like genitals that may not be, things look like gender's really kind of confused in it, and it kind of puts you in a guessing game of like, what body part is this, what gender is this? And yeah, we were trying to confuse those kind of ideas. Our elders from our community carry a lot of knowledge, and I think it's important to try to create a line between the generations so that we don't lose knowledge. At the same time, we can also continually be questioning like what's not there and what kind of resources are going to archives, because if I think about the gay and lesbian archives in Quebec, it's quite clear that they aren't operating on funding, and this maybe also relates to what is represented there, because if they had more resources, then they would probably be able to include more. So I think it's really important to support.
My name's Jules Pidak. I teach in communication at Université de Montréal, and I'm really interested in lesbian history in Montreal. Got very interested in the bars, reading some of the work of my colleagues like Lynn Chamberlain and Julie Podmore. And I thought, well, we keep losing this history. Some of it has been written down, but it's mostly in fragments everywhere, as much queer history is. So I thought, let's find a way to bring it back to life a little bit. And that's where the idea of the installation came from. What's going to be very important is to think about difference across gender, across sexuality, across differences of race and social class and age. I think that we're really in a moment where we're starting to grapple with the challenge of intersectionality as an activist and a creative project, how we ensure that all of the different people in our community, in their tremendous difference, have the recognition that they need, are safe, are able to live in dignity as citizens. I feel wonderful about the exhibit. I never would have dreamed that there'd be so much interest and enthusiasm on the part of the lesbian, queer women, queer community more generally, and that was really who it was for. So I'm really delighted, and I'm quite moved to see how important it is to people to have this fleeting space, another ephemeral space to meet up and to remember one part of our past.
My name is Julie Podmore. My role with the exhibition is kind of tangential. My voice is among the soundtracks that are upstairs, and I've worked with Jules for a long time on the history of the lesbian community, and also I made many of the maps. The maps are really important to that. For me, I'm an urban geographer, and for visualizing the territory and the various spaces that lesbians have created for themselves. So the maps are designed so that you can see the different locations that they've occupied over time, so that lesbians don't look invisible, basically. Because lesbians have had so few spaces in the history of the city. Visibility is important, but being visible to one another is more important, I think, even, so that you have solidarity and that you have a place where you can always count on going to.
My name is Suzanne Gerard, and I'm displaying at the Inevitable Park Gallery in Madame Arthur exhibit upstairs photos I did almost, 40 years ago when I was a younger thing, going to the bars and participating. It was a really active moment in feminism. It was the décennie des femmes. Everything was happening, art, music. So it was just part of that generation, and there was a lot of bars, and so it's a bit an echo of some of the bars that were there, not all of them, but just some of the bars. And also I did a series that I exhibited at the Powerhouse, which was pictures of women outside La Biris, the very popular bar in Saint-Denis. And it was a montage, much more I would say a lab, like darkroom montage. A lot of work was done post-production, like after. It was all film, and it was all actual prints. There was no digital back then. And that's what people don't realize, because I was like a lab rat. I loved to do work in the lab. And it was a mix, because we were doing a lot of images of women. I was part of a collective called Plexigráphe. And we were doing a lot of lab, darkroom. We had a lab, the collective had it, and we're also doing silkscreen. So there's a little bit of silkscreen in the exhibit, because that was the period where we were extremely active. Apart from being out on the street, all the feminist movement, all the bars, everything happening, the music. So it was very active time. It doesn't reflect that time, it's just a little bit of the bars and the people that actually saw each other around that period.
Cet espace a été dédié à la reconstruction d'un bar qui s'appelle chez Madame Arthur. Et donc c'est une présentation de la reconstruction du bar qui représente vraiment la culture de ce qu'il y avait dans les années 80 à Montréal. Donc c'est spécifiquement à Montréal. Et il y a aussi la reconstruction avec des tables, des vidéos, des audios enregistrés par Lynn Trépanier, puis Trépanier, pardon, excusez-moi, et aussi MP Grenier. Donc ça, c'est des moments historiques pour Montréal.
Hi, my name is Lily Shragi. I'm an artist and curator and writer, and I work in performance, text-based installations, and sculpture. So the For Whom Masculinities Matter exhibition is curated by Gijit Collective, which is made up of Adrienne Huard and Lindsay Nixon. And Lacey Burning is one of the artists in the exhibition with me. And I worked with Asineak and Dana Danger to film in one take the performance that I did live in the opening on Thursday. And the performance is a long text on Indigenous desire and rimming and bodies and connectivity and overcoming colonial shame. And it's written in Samoan and in French. I think it's really important today to think about Indigenous masculinities in really broad terms, and to think about lots of different impacts, and also how structures of domination impact us continuously, and how we might imagine different kinds of futures. It's really urgent in a world where there's so much violence and hatred and fear-mongering, that we come together and find ways to be together. So in Samoan culture, we have multiple genders. Two-spirit is equivalent to Fa'afafine and Fa'atama, which are two different concepts in Samoan culture that I fit within. And so it means having access to multiple kinds of roles in the community and at different times fulfilling different ones and serving the community, really.
I'm Lindsay Nixon. I am a curator, independent. I am the editor-at-large for Canadian Arts. I'm an art history PhD student at McGill, a Shirk doctoral recipient, a writer. I just published a book named Need a Snack.
I'm Adrienne Heward. I am an art critic. I am a MFA student at OUTtv University in Toronto for the Curatorial and Criticism program. I am Anishinaabe from Treaty 1 territory.
Well, it's such a diverse statement. I think for me personally, I feel like I'm falling a little bit out of describing myself as Two-Spirit, because often when I think of Two-Spirit, I do think of maybe an older generation, maybe one that is more lesbian and gay focused. There's something happening now with gender, traditional forms of gender and sexuality that are being reclaimed, and even wanting to use our own traditional words to describe them, that maybe I'm a part of that new sort of generation or movement. But at the same time, I totally pay all respects to the Two-Spirit organizers before us who made space for us to even have these conversations. I think it's a really paramount and important part of our communities. The way they used it was more of an umbrella term to encompass like gay, lesbian, transgender, anything to do with like diverse gender and sexuality in Indigenous community, but also relating that to our traditions of non-binary gender and diverse sexuality.
And it's interesting, like watching maybe this generation kind of falling out of that identity of two-spiritedness, and maybe even looking at things that are a little bit more, looking at say like identities such as indigiqueer, or looking at the actual translation in Anishinaabe-Moan is Nish Meni Doag. So even like saying instead of two-spirit it would be Nish Meni Doag, but or even just like identifying as your own gender in your own language, you know, or sexuality as well.
Well, for me, it was just, I was seeing a lot of discussion about Indigenous masculinity in Native studies or Native circles, but I feel like they always left out the conversation of non-binary gender, or what it means to be a trans-masculine Indigenous person, or what it means to be like a person like Leili, who's very identifies with the feminine spirit and the masculine spirit, and to be Samoan. I wanted it to be like more of a diverse conversation of the perspectives that are left out of that conversation, and Never Part felt like the perfect space to do that and to house that conversation, because I feel like the reality is sometimes when we need to have these conversations amongst Indigenous people as queer and trans people, we can't always have them in Indigenous communities. Sometimes we need our LGBTQ kin too in the city to help us facilitate these conversations. When I'm thinking about what we're trying to liberate ourselves from within this idea of Indigenous masculinities, I think about colonial patriarchy, imperialist sort of forms of masculinity that have affected our communities, especially our men, and how that is a form of seeking liberation to just be able to name queerness, to be able to name non-binary gender within our communities. That is extremely liberating for us, I think.
My name is Lacey Burning, and I'm a Mohawk artist from Six Nations. I work in photography, video, sculpture, and installation, so yeah. Well, it's a ribbon shirt that I made when I was at the Bush Gallery residency. It's basically just a ribbon shirt that I kind of use parachute cord to make the ribbons, and I kind of think about like survival through culture and visibility, because the parachute cord is bright orange. So to me it's a little bit of like this relationship between like survival and culture and being queer and trans. I made it for other queer and trans Native people, or like people who feel like kind of in that weird space of gender that's often inexplicable to most people. Yeah, I just hope that they kind of maybe feel seen or heard or like supported by it in some way.
Hi, I'm Chauncey Dandridge. I am I'm the resident DJ at the Stonewall Inn. I tech all of the cabaret shows and the drag shows there. We also do monthly fundraisers. I'm also a very staunch activist for different LGBT organizations throughout the city. I'm a very good connector, so I have a very good network with the city in the nightlife and in the activist circles. What's happening in New York this year is not only is it the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising, but it is also World Pride. New York is hosting World Pride, which is it's insanity. It's rainbow insanity, as we've been calling it.
I guess what pride means to me is
like embracing myself in my fullness, loving every part of me, being proud of all those parts. So I hope that like for the future, for what can come for queer youth for the future, there will be first of all, kind of fires put out in terms of different laws that will be like supporting our identities existing more freely. Talking about Quebec, you know, we have all the stuff surrounding name change and legal gender marker change and kind of things of that nature. But I also hope exactly like that we can grow to find an even bigger sense of community. I think that throughout the years, there have been a lot of things that have divided us in terms of all the letters in the acronym, and I think that there's a lot of power in community and there's a lot of power in all of the things that we bring to the table. So ideally, we come to a place where we can also feel comfortable sharing those things and feel like our contributions are valued to the community as well.
I think definitely queer liberation movements in Stonewall and in other parts of the world within the exhibitions here reflect and are sometimes in parallel to different Indigenous gender and sexuality-based liberation movements, but are, I think, often expressed in very different ways, not so much around separatism and more around creating space within communal kinship systems.
Up to now, I think we took all the liberties we have and the life we lead for granted. But if you look at what's going on in North America right now, in Germany right now, in Eastern Europe, but also in France, also in London, homophobic crimes have increased, even in big city centers like London, like Munich, like Berlin. Parties have come to power which are outspoken homophobic. On the other hand, at the same time, we notice that there is more potential for protest again. I think people get more politicized, and which is important. I think also that our so appreciated liberal democracies have to defend what can be summoned under the cover of LGBT rights. And if minority rights are not protected anymore, society is really in danger. And I think we notice situations where which only occurred recently, and therefore it's extremely important, I think, that people get aware of what's going on right now and maybe should get more political.
I think it's important for all of us to know our history, whether we be youth or whether we be older. I think history is the place from which we can move forward. How can you change anything if you don't really know about the past? It's kind of like sort of, you'd be reinventing the wheel all the time. I think history gives us some clues. So I think in terms of young queers, I think it would be really helpful and to create a base of knowledge. I also think it's super fun. And it's really interesting, you know, like all this sort of stuff that we see around us in this exhibition, for instance. I mean, I'm learning things every day.
The 50 years of resistance, I think that's interesting for Indigenous communities because we've been resisting colonial patriarchy and gender binary for 400 plus years. So for us, I think it's important for us to reframe it as 400 plus years of resistance against patriarchy and masculinities and cisnormativity, heteronormativity. And honestly, like moving into the future, it hurts me to see that I still see Two-Spirit youth struggling to be accepted in their communities, experiencing violence, being pushed out into street-involved experiences because they can't find safety in their own communities. There's still so much to fight for, and like that's so hard to name, but I feel like we still have a whole mountain to climb about this stuff in our communities.
Yes, I definitely agree. And one thing that I hear a lot about queer and Two-Spirit folks is like when returning to home communities or returning to ceremony, that there's not necessarily a place for them because they're so gendered and divided, you know. So what I'd like to see is that there is a place for them because ceremony is such a healing space. So when you're not allowed access to that, like what does that do for our young folks who already struggle so much in this society, right?
Looking to the future, still there are numerous things to be done. And to start with, for me, one of the most essential and simple things is for the German language to to develop a denomination for non-binary persons, as the English language did with taking the they to denominate non-binary persons. We don't have this possibility in German, and we have to work on that. So how do we talk about people who are neither the one nor the other, and how do we find a way of approaching them with all the necessary respect? This could be a very small but a very essential step, and from this you see that there are a lot of tiny things to do.
Being a part of the Stonewall family is something I don't think anybody could prepare themselves for, not even for just this year in particular, but there are times where I come into work and we might be a little tired, might be a little grumpy, or might be a little like your mind is on something else that's happening the next day, and then you realize someone comes in, and most of the time it's a tourist, or it's a person who it's their first time there, and there's something behind their eyes and something in their movements that they really feel like, especially this year in particular, but even a couple of years ago we were just realizing when it became a historical landmark and then it became the monument. When we were kids in the 90s and we would walk past Stonewall, we knew what it was, but it wasn't the mecca that it has become. Pride is a big word, even though it only has 5 letters.
The Canadian Mint called me. My first thought was like, what have I done wrong? The woman on the phone, she explained to me the whole thing, that in 1969 homosexuality was decriminalized in Canada, and the Mint wanted to commemorate that on a coin, and they decided that I was the guy to do it. She said, I've been talking with the people. Anyway, how does this sound? A normal loonie embossed and a sterling silver commemorative coin in full color. And I said, yeah, I can live with that. This is an important thing because, well, when I was a little gay boy in Victoria, I didn't have any role models. I knew that I liked boys. I knew that it was bad. My only role model was like the center square on Hollywood Squares, honey. It's really important because, get clamped here. There's history, a lot of people, myself included, went through tough times, as little gay boys, girls, It has not been an easy road for homosexuals. I'm so proud to call Canada my home now, because how cool is it that they decided to commemorate the decriminalization of homosexuality on a goddamn coin? It wasn't lost on me that from now till the end of currency, I was going to say time, but I'm sure currency will end at some point, to the end of currency, when somebody pulls that coin out of their pocket, it's going to remind them that love is love, And that's the most important thing out of this whole thing. It's just simple. It's so goddamn simple. Now, lots of people say, 50 years ago wasn't the right time. Fuck that, who cares? The fact is, we're having conversations about it, it's decriminalized, everything's good, and get with the program, people. You know what I mean? Just get with it.